I'm a few minutes live, a few minutes early today. For those of you watching the replay, we're going to be talking about how it feels when you start your spiritual awakening. We are starting the book study on Eckhart Tolle's or Tolle. I don't know how to say it. The Power of Now. I'm a little bit early, so I'm just making sure everything is all set up. Who is joining? Is it you, Rotunda? I always just guess because you're so loyal and supportive. But if you're on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, I can't see you unless you comment. And so I would love it if you would comment and participate. Again, we're going to be going over how it feels when you start your spiritual awakening. And one of the most powerful books that will help you understand more about this feeling is The Power of Now. That's the book study that was requested. So that's what we'll be going over today. We'll start promptly here in a few. Oh, hey, Kay Gill, how are you? Very powerful book, very powerful principles that are going to help you to get out of your head and really learn what it means to live life. But it is not an easy book to unpack and understand. And so if you've been having trouble tapping into your spirituality or navigating your spiritual awakening, or you want to learn how to tap back into spirituality because you've started to base your life on a lot of things in your external world that get you frustrated and get you down, then this is going to be a very rich discussion. I'm just going to keep going just for the replay purposes. For those of you that don't know, on August the 26th at 7:30 Central Standard Time, I'll be holding a totally free class on how to protect your boundaries, how to protect your energy. So this class is perfect for those of you that feel like you go into spaces and you pick up on that negative energy and it kind of drains you, or maybe you get around people's energy, negative energy, and even though you feel like you were doing okay, once you get around that energy, it kind of drains you or brings you down. You need to learn how to protect your energy, especially if you're highly sensitive or super empathic and you haven't learned how to do so. And also the class will teach you not only how to protect your energy, but how to enact boundaries, because one of the reasons why you may not be able to distinguish your energy from other people's energy is boundaries. A lot of people that have these issues, they struggle, especially in your closest relationships, when you're feeling all the feels and people tell you to get over it, or people are coming to you as the go-to person asking you for help or advice and draining you. But when you need help, when you need to give a little bit of energy, there's nobody there to kind of help balance you and take some of that load off your shoulders so you get overwhelmed and tired. This is going to be the perfect class for you. And if you want to learn more about that, you can DM me or send me a private message later on after class, or you can just text the word mastery to 833-231-4407. Last announcement for those of you that see me looking here, I'm multi-streaming on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So if you have a comment or question, please make sure to put it in the comment box. Otherwise, I don't know that you're watching. And then over here, we have Instagram. We have a very deep book. I've been doing these book studies, these daily live streams, Monday through Thursday at this time for this is the third week, and we went through Atomic Habits. So if you have trouble shifting your life, adopting good habits and sticking to those habits, then you may want to go back and watch all those replays. Phenomenal book to help you change your life. However, we are by request going to be talking about the power of now. And the most powerful thing I like about this, especially starting off, is it allows you to get out of your head and start really living in spirit, the spirit of who you are, so that you can start to decrease the amount of stress and pain and suffering and things that you may have to deal with on the day-to-day. So I'm going to go ahead and get started because I start at 7 o'clock Central Standard Time, and we are on chapter 1 because we just started this book. So it is The Power of Now. This is going to blow your mind. If you haven't tried an activity like this before, or if you haven't thought about what he's discussing in chapter 1, you really may have to watch this replay several times and maybe try the activity that I'm going to share with you in order to understand the magnitude and the power that you're going to get from just the first few pages that we're going to go over in chapter 1. So, chapter 1 is called You Are Not Your Mind. And it starts off with the greatest obstacle to enlightenment. And the greatest obstacle to enlightenment is ourselves. It's the construct that we've built around our identity and who we are and how we've grown up and how society has taught us to be, and all of the things that stop us from really experiencing, I'm going to say, what true happiness, true enlightenment, true satisfaction, and true purpose and meaning could feel like in our life. And then he specifically goes on to talk about the word being, because you're going to hear a lot in spirituality about being. How can you not do? I even talk about this with you all. I talk about this with my clients. How can you start to be? Not do, not have, but be. And I don't think a lot of people know what that means. And do you really know who you are as a being outside of, what you look like in the mirror, the thoughts that you think, your job, all of the titles that we put upon ourselves in order to create this false sense of identity that is not really and truly who we are as beings. So, he was asked to explain being, and he said that being is the eternal, ever-present. Being is not only beyond, but also deep within every form as its innermost, invisible, and indestructible essence. This is powerful. It also states that this means that being is accessible to you now as your own deepest self and your true nature. But don't seek to grasp this with your mind. Don't try to understand it. You can only know it when the mind is still. So that's where we talk about meditation. We talk about quieting the mind. We talk about slowing down that mental activity. I'm not even going to call it thinking. I'm going to call it mental activity that's constantly going on in our lives that we allow to control us and we allow to let us think that's who we are. When you are present, when you are fully in the attention of the now, is when you can intensely feel who you are as a being. Being can be felt, but it can never be understood mentally. And I disagree with him. And I'm going to do this activity with you all to help you understand what it feels like when you are being. So let's just take a break and talk about that, because a lot of the suffering that my clients come to me with are things like they have relationships that aren't going the way that they wanted, or financially they're not where they want to be, or career goals, all of the things. There are just certain things in our external world that lead us to believe that we aren't experiencing the life that we want to live. And a lot of times what we will try to do is think our way out of situations. And when we do try to move forward, when we do try to recalibrate and see, okay, well, how can we move forward more purposely? And I ask what these clients want, what you may want in your life, oftentimes it's really hard for you to verbalize in words what it is that you want. And a lot of times you don't really know what you want, even if you think you know what you want, because you haven't really dropped down into a space of, again, not the earthly stuff, not the conditioning, not who you think you are, not the identities, but really separating yourself from all of the stuff that we pile onto ourselves about who we are. And we connect with something much deeper than ourselves, our soul. And through our soul, we figure out who we are and what we want. Because until you can learn to live life from that space, you're going to find that undercurrent of maybe depression and that undercurrent of feeling unfulfilled and feeling like you don't have a purpose in life is not because there's, maybe not so much the things that are externally not lining up the way that you want them to. It's internally your sense of being and your sense of connection to who you are and understanding yourself fully is not connected the way that it should. So this is a confusing exercise, so I'm going to try to explain it as easily as possible for you to try this several times so you can understand what it feels like when you're living life not as, me sitting here talking to you with the gray shirt on, being a teacher. Hey, Bra Brett. It's more about when I take away all of this, when I take away the body that I'm in, when I take away the clothes that I wear, when I take away the role that I play in society. Who am I really? And again, by connecting to the who you are really is how you're going to truly start to tap into happiness, fulfillment, and all of the things. So one day, so for those of you that don't know, my husband, his name is Greg. And we are two totally different people. I'm more of a laid back person, chill, don't really think about too much. People might think I'm mysterious or deep, but not really. And then Greg is a person that has a lot of mental activity going on, a lot of chatter in his head. And you could tell because it's like his energy is never fully in his body. It's more like somewhere outside of his body. And so one day we did an activity just to drop down, for him to drop down into his body, but also for me to understand what goes on in somebody's body or thoughts or mental activity that feels like that. So we had him just start every stream of thought that he had, instead of just keeping it in his head, just say it out loud. And when he started to say everything that he was thinking, there was an enormous amount of chatter, not even about what was going on in our situation. I think we were like going through a drive-through getting something to eat. But it was like the brain was just moving everywhere. Where are we going to park to eat the food? Where are we going to do this? What are we going to do next? Is the sun too hot? Should we move over here? Like totally. And then I started doing mine. And when I started talking about the way that I think, it was slower. And it was more observant. It was like, oh, I wonder what that looks like, or why is this way? I'm saying this to get you to think about something very powerful, because I know a lot of you, if I ask you to tell me what is your mind? And Kay Gill, you say you have a busy mind too. And so you think you are your mind, right? You think that those thoughts feel so real and they feel so a part of who you are and in your body, that that's you. And we'll say it like that. We'll say, like you said, I have a busy mind. Or Greg will say, my mind is always going. I'm always thinking. However, you're not. And this is this is so simple and so powerful. And this is how you step out of you thinking that you're a part of your mind and that you have a busy mind, to you understanding that you're not your mind. If you can stop and you can start to do that little activity and you can talk about every thought that's going on in your head, then you're not your mind, right? You are observing your mind. You are an observer of something. You're an observer of your mind. You are an observer of the way your body moves. You're an observer of the way that you eat, the way that you think, the way that you talk, the way that you dress, the way that you interact with the people around you. Those are not you if you can sit back and observe them. So if you can sit back and observe them, in that spot where you're actually saying the stream of thought that's going on in your mind, if you play this little activity, then guess who the being is? The being is the observer. So that's who you really are. And who is that person? Who is that person that is able to be in a body, move around in this body, identify with this body, identify with these thoughts, however, observe them at the same time? That's freaky to me. We're going to keep going, but I'll hold on that. I want you guys to think about that, because it sounds simple and it's not. Are you guys sort of understanding what I'm saying? Let it sink in. Give me hearts, give me comments, whatever. I'm going to keep going and we'll come back to that. I just want you to understand, when that little second that you do that, you are no longer getting sucked in by your outer world, and you're no longer getting sucked in by the thoughts of your inner world. you are just being, you are present. That is the most connected that I think that the best way that I can explain what it feels like when you are in that energy of being your soul being. Okay, I see Kay Gill said 100%. Thank you. All right, so if you can think of that, if you can think of your thoughts, if you can start to look at yourself almost like you're watching yourself in a movie, even though it feels like you're inside of your body, if you can think of that observer, then you can start to understand yourself and the power of who you are. That is your I am. You're not Yashika teaching. You're not Yashika thinking a lot. You're not Yashika with a busy mind. You're not Yashika cooking dinner. You happen to be doing those things, but the true I am, and I'm saying I am, is that being that is able to observe your thoughts, your actions, all of those things. All right. So the greatest obstacle for people to stay in that state for a very long period of time, because that's truly what spiritual awakening is. It's not identifying with the outer world, which people seem to be very good at when they say that they've went through a spiritual awakening. They know that there's something more to life. But what people are not so good at is that spiritual awakening means you're also not identifying with the inner world, the busy chatter, the things that you are able to observe and separate yourself from, and still feel like you are some sort of separate being that you never probably even think about when you're doing the activities of being an observer. And the greatest obstacle to experiencing this reality on the day-to-day is because most of us identify with our mind. And since we identify with our mind, guess what we let the mind do? We let the mind run the show. We let the mind tell us that we're obsessive compulsive, that we have anxiety, that we worry, that we think too much, when truly it all is just a whole bunch of mental activity. And this incessant noise prevents you from finding that realm of inner stillness that is inseparable from being. Because when you get into that stillness, that's when you're going to start to be. That's when you just are. You're not labels. You're not any of the things you think you are. You're not rich. You're not poor. You're not worthy or not worthy enough. You just are. And because we don't live that way, we live from the mind, we live from the label, we live from the constructs, and oftentimes these things start to cause these anxieties and limiting beliefs and blocks. We also create a false mind-made self that casts a shadow of fear and suffering. This is powerful. This is telling you now that if I asked you what your mind was, most of you would say it's your brain, and it's not. It's some sort of a stimulation, it's some sort of a response to the things that are going on around you. So it's an impulse, right? It's a process that your body does. But you've identified with this process. And because you've identified with this process, it starts to create fear and suffering. Life coaching said, is this considered programming? I mean, yeah, it is considered programming, right? Because we come into this earth as a body, and because I'm going to take a step back, because we are taught that what is real in this world are the things that we experience with taste, touch, smell, hearing, whatever, sight, seeing, then we feel we only give validity to those things. And therefore, we go through life living very reactively and being stimulated by all of these things that we sense with our five senses, and we respond based on what it is that we see. However, there's a whole nother world, right? And we can feel that other world when we start to observe our thoughts, when we start to be in stillness. And we can look at the things that our mind is doing separate from ourselves, and understand that if the mind is over here and we're someone over here, then what is that? And that's something you can't taste, touch, feel, see, you can't do those things with your five senses. But because we haven't been taught that, we don't have a lot of experience living in that world. And because we don't have a lot of experience living in that world, we start to experience what he calls and what I experience with my clients as suffering and fear and worry and anxiety and lack and all of the things that we put labels on ourselves because of the way that we've been programmed. When in fact, if we stripped all that away, we all are just a soul that is borrowing this body, borrowing those, the mind, borrowing all of these things. So truly, what real life is about is much, much deeper than that. So he says, identification with your mind creates an opaque, and this is kind of what I was saying, an opaque screen of concepts, labels, images, words, judgments, and definitions that block all true relationships. This type of labeling, this type of construct, these identifications with these things. So it doesn't mean that we don't need them, right? Because we are humans. You're welcome. And we have to put structure into the world that we experience. So it's not that we don't need to label stuff to make it more logical and sequential to be able to move through this world. However, we identify with them. And that's the part that blocks us up. And this comes between you and yourself, you and other people, you and nature, and even you and God. And I don't want to get too like spiritual, religious wise, but for some of you that are really starting to get what I'm trying to say, if you think about yourself as I am, and you are that being, whatever that is for you, that is able to observe those thoughts and that activity, that centeredness that you feel when you're observing yourself, what do you think God is? It's not some construct that we made an identity for, right? A label, an image, words, judgments, or any of those things that we've made God out to be that causes us to be separated from each other, separated from ourselves, separated from nature, all of the things. If God is in us and we're in his image or her image or its image, I'm going to say its image, then what do you think that feeling, what do you think that being is? What would God be like? It wouldn't be any of the labels that we have used to identify that type of a person. So that's all I'm going to say about the religious stuff. Okay. So you can no longer feel this oneness as self-evident reality. A lot of you probably believe it to be true. Like you may, even when I'm saying this, you can believe that I'm telling you that there's a soul inside of you, right? That feels different and that is much more than what this physical world has us to believe. But you don't know it to be true. Because to know it to be true would mean that in your own world, instead of letting your mind control the show, instead of letting your mind make you this reactive being that is somebody that responds to the relationships and the temporary circumstances that you go through in life, you would be much more centered, living from a much more centered place. And that centered place comes from that being, that little taste of feeling that you would feel if you do the activity that I had mentioned. The mind is a superb instrument if used rightly, and that's what I teach. I teach intellect plus intuition. I think intuition is hugely powerful, which is intuition has you to step into your being. So that is why if you see what I do, if you watch my videos, if you look at my Instagram, I use tools to help me tap into my intuition. I use tools to teach my clients to tap into their intuition because that is power. But like he's saying, the mind is superb. You don't want to discount the fact that you have this powerful tool that can help you level up in life. And so I do like intellect plus intuition. But it's not so much that you use your mind wrongly. Most people don't use their mind at all. It uses you. So the problem is that the way that we've even been taught to use our mind due to like life coaching 365 said with the programming, the way that we've been taught to use our mind is that we haven't been taught to use our mind. We may have been taught to think a little bit when we solve math problems, when we think about physics and everything else, but otherwise our mind is using us, and it's a disease. And he said, you believe that you are your mind. And so I'm going to skip to another part. He says, let me ask you this, because a lot of people say, well, no, I'm not my mind. I can understand that, my mind is over here. And if I'm quiet, I can observe my thoughts. But here's where you know that you've really started to disconnect from identifying with one more piece of information that disconnects you from being your true self. He said, let me ask you this. Can you be free of your mind whenever you want to? Have you found the off button? Have you found the off button to your mind? Or let's go back up to the top. Or do you believe that you are your mind and it uses you instead of you using it as the tool that it's supposed to be to help facilitate you living whatever kind of life it is that you want to live? All right. And then let's see what else I underlined for us. So if you can't turn the off button off, and if you can't free yourself from the mind, even what the little activity that I said to even pull yourself out and feel that feeling as an observer looking at your mind, then your mind is using you and you have unconsciously identified with it. So you don't even know that you are its slave. You are a slave to your mind, right? The beginning of freedom, and this is what I'm trying to get you to feel. The beginning of freedom is the realization that you are not the possessing entity. You are not the thinker. And I'm not going to say thinker because most of us are not thinking. We just have a whole bunch of mental activity going on incessantly. But the realization that you are not the possessing entity, the thinker. You are not the thinker. Knowing this enables you to observe the entity. So observe the entity. If you start to say, I'm not the thinker, I can observe the thinker, because you can observe the thoughts that you're thinking. That's kind of freaky. The moment you start watching the thinker, the mind, I'm going to call it the mind. The moment you start watching your mind, a higher level of consciousness becomes activated. And that's when you start to realize this is freedom in a way, even though it doesn't take you out of the current worldly circumstances that you're experiencing in painful relationships, or maybe jobs you don't want to go to, or you're trying to manifest a better life and it's not successful, it's not doing what it wants. I'm not saying that leaves, but when you start to watch the thinker and you activate this higher level of consciousness, what it does is it shows you that there is much more to life than the intelligence that we thought, the things that we experience with our senses. And you start to realize that all this time that you've only been identifying as someone that was the thinker versus someone that is outside of this mind that is always thinking, then you start to realize how much life maybe that you didn't see, that you didn't experience, that you didn't live, but you start to awaken to the fact that there's more, right? There's more and there's deeper, there's levels. And that frees you from the constructs of being trapped in this matrix of, I'm just trying to see how I can word this because this is my words, not his. Like, you start to free yourself from getting trapped in the matrix of pain and struggle and strife, because it's really all not real. If you think about it, it's a construct. It's a construct that we've all agreed to play a part in, that if we don't play it the way that it was told for us to play, then we feel pain and we feel sorrow and we feel like we're losing at life and we feel like we don't have what we need to have. And so we have all of these things that come up. But if you start to activate this intelligence that he's talking about and that I'm talking about and that I'm, constantly helping my clients work on, you start to see that there's much more to life than what you experience on the day-to-day. And that frees you up from playing the game sometimes, right? Sometimes you get to choose, well, I'm not going to play the game anymore. Or if you do choose the game, you play it with more awareness. And through that self-awareness and through the awareness of what's going on around you, you're able to separate yourself from some of the things that did cause you pain and worry and anxiety and making you feel unworthy or making you feel like you are loved and making you feel like life is getting you down, because you start to see it in the grand scheme of things in a deeper level. If we expand our intelligence a little bit bigger, that really is not life at all. It's just an illusion that we've all chose to play a part in. So we're going to end here, and then start typing questions. If any of you have any questions about the things that I'm covering, because I know it's super deep. If you have questions, start typing them as I go through this last little thought for today. The good news is that you can free yourself from your mind. You can take the first step right now. And the first step is to start listening to the voice in your head as often as you can, and pay attention to any repetitive thought patterns. And this is what he means by watching the thinker. And that's what I mean by you becoming the observer. It's another way of saying, listen to the voice in your head, be there as the witnessing presence of what's going on inside your head. And when you listen to that voice, don't judge it, just listen. Because right now you're trying to learn, right? You're trying to learn years of what you've been allowing to use you and control you. And so it's going to just bring you even another deeper layer of self-awareness besides the fact that you're the observer. There is the voice, and here I am listening to it. So there's the voice when you start to listen to the thoughts in your head, and then here I am listening to that voice. This is I am. This is the realization of I am. This is the sense of your own true presence. And your own true presence is not a thought, because you're observing a thought that's over here, you're over here listening to the thought, right? And you arise from beyond the mind. So we're going to stop there. For those of you that have the book, that the edition that I have, we stopped on page 19. I forgot to mention that for those of you that do have that. So this is super deep. So we're only on page 19. And if you really take to heart what he's saying, and you feel like when you go, if you don't understand this, go get quiet, take 5 minutes, and just start to observe your thought. And when you think about your thoughts over here, and you are somebody that's actually observing your thoughts, think about who you are and what that feels like, and what kind of world that's going to open up for you to understand that you are a being that you may not have even known that you were, because you were so identified with the illusion that you never even knew what it felt like to be separate from it. And that's when the awakening starts. All right. Any questions, anybody? I don't see any questions. So, all right, no questions. So tomorrow, same time, same place, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, we'll be leaving off where we left off. Again, you do not need the book to pay attention or to come and join us. This is just me giving you my interpretation from my experience working with my clients, and also just from his interpretation of what it is to start to connect with something much more powerful than this illusion that we've been sold on, because it will absolutely start to free you and make you more happy and make you more peaceful. Cover up in the next slide. No. Also, for those of you that want to learn what it feels like to go through a system and work with me privately, I work with my clients, like I said, on intellect and intuition to come from life from a spiritual place, but also use that mind as a tool so that you're able to be more powerful and able to accomplish what it is that you want. You can work with me privately. You can learn more about that. I can send you a link, or you can talk to me later. Yeah, no. Anyway, I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye.